Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Now, usually I wear a nicer shirt for this, but I wanted to show off my NaNoWriMo shirt because today's December 1st here. And of course this video won't post until after March or in March sometime. But I got the t-shirt. I finished the NaNoWriMo challenge. I got the t-shirt. I got a certificate. And it's not filled in yet. They said I had to fill it in with ink myself. But I have a friend that has very beautiful handwriting. I'm going to ask her to fill that in for me. Now, today is Tuesday. And today we're going to add to your cave. Before we dive in, let me give you a rough plot of what I have so far, or what we should have so far. Your plot may be a little different depending on how you decided to do some of the writing prompts that I gave. Number 1, a resistance group makes plans to scout out the enemy's fortress or stronghold. Now this was actually part 3 of our writings, but I took this and I stuck it at the front of the story. Number 2, something goes wrong or stray during the scouting expedition and one or more characters escape but stumble into or fall into a frightening cave or a scary cave. This was part 1, and some of us were writing in first person at this point. I was writing in first person. I had to change it to my character's name, and I told y'all not to worry about, don't get hung up on those kinds of issues, because Microsoft Word helps you to fix those things. So just create and write, and then you can change stuff later. Number 3, the one or more characters try to get his or her bearings, and they explore the cave, or he or she explores the cave. This was part 2 that I gave us, the second writing prompt that I gave us about the cave. Some of you may have found an exit at that point, and that is fine. It's also fine if you decide to cut that scene of finding the exit and put it at the end. You know, cut, paste, whatever, and paste it further in your story. Microsoft Word is great for such things. That's why I don't want y'all to get hung up on, I need to do this, I just write and then cut, paste, whatever you want to do. Microsoft makes it very easy for us writers to do these kinds of things. Now, number 4, cut back to the rest of the resistance group, or the people missing the person in the cave. Some of you may have had a neighbor missing, or somebody on the picnic missing that person in the cave. I had the resistance group missing my person. I believe this was part 4 when we were doing the writing prompt. In my story, the people discuss what went wrong, and they can't determine what went wrong. Number 5, in the story, return to the cave scene, or the exit if you found one, and continue exploring. Does the cave or exit beyond the cave hold secrets or clues to the enemy? What do you or does your main character find? Now this should have been part 5 or so when we were doing all the writing prompts. In my cave there were certainly some secrets, but we don't know how the gnomes fit in with the antagonist. So there was that big massive creature. We don't know if the enemy mutilated something or transformed something into that. We don't know about the gnomes, how they fit in with the antagonist. So there's some secrets there that we don't know about. We still don't know how they're going to be interrelated in the story. Number 6, start weaving the problem in for your antagonist. What does he or she need to know? What does the problem for your protagonist, sorry about that, start weaving the problem for your protagonist. What does he or she need to know to be able to fight the antagonist? How exactly is the antagonist against your characters? Is there a spy or a potential spy who is helping your protagonist, or at least who is on the protagonist's side? So, like in my story, the gnomes that look like children, and we don't know if they're on Solera's side or not. We don't know that. But there was also discussion about, excuse me, Commander Thurnal. So, anytime you have people against people or something, there could be somebody that decides to switch sides. So there's always that potential. It doesn't mean you have to put it in your story. This is just what you want to do, what your fun is. Now, number 7. Start letting the reader know the powers, prowess, or abilities of the protagonist. And that could be while the protagonist is learning about them himself or herself. Solera, they keep saying she knows the old ways, but she's never done any of that stuff. So we kind of find out what the old ways are a little bit, even as Solera is trying to do them. She's trying to send a thought to Missing. She still doesn't know if she's successful. But those are some of the abilities that she has. And those 6 and 7, those were parts 6 and 7. I'm not sure exactly where I sliced it when I gave the writing prompt. And to be sure, we're not going to have a number for each part of the rest of the story as we go. Now, part 8 will give you a guidance to continue, but it's also quite broad. So you could probably use part 8, this piece, when we go to part 9, part 10, whatever. So, part 8 is start the struggle. What hurdles does the protagonist have to leap to get even face the antagonist? So, you know, in my story, an antagonist is in that fortress and they can't really get to him. They don't know where he is. They just know that's his fortress. So how do they get to him? Another one of my stories that I'm writing, it's a sci-fi, and these aliens keep landing on planets and destroying the people, but there's one guy that's kind of over everybody, but they're going to have to take down the jets or the spacecraft before they can get to that one person to fight that one person. And I haven't totally worked that into the story yet. That's the fun part. But, you know, you just because there's a bad guy doesn't mean you just go have a sword fight. Hey, high noon, you know. It's not like that. I mean, if you're doing an old Western and you want Billy the Kid to meet you at high noon, then yeah, you can meet the antagonist that way. But in a lot of stories, like Lord of the Rings, they had the ring and they wanted to do it, but, you know, and tossing that ring in was supposed to destroy that Dark Lord, but they had to get to him first. They had to get inside the fortress. They had to maneuver their way through all of the stuff before they could get to where they could fight him. So, start the struggle. This is number 8. I'm reading it again. Start the struggle. What hurdles does the protagonist have to leap to get to even face the antagonist? How protected is the antagonist? So this part 8 is like essential in most every plot. The protagonist has a struggle, and the protagonist has to grow. So far, this story with our cave has just been piecemeal. But when you go back and edit, you need to make sure everything is interrelated. You might go back and find that, you know, yeah, you wrote this part when I said this part, but maybe you need to cut it and paste it here and stuff. It's like I put the third part in front. That's how I decided to do it at this time. But you can do that with your story. You can cut and paste it. You don't have to necessarily cut it out. You can paste it and say, oh, it would flow better if it was here. So, it just, when you edit, then you make sure everything is smooth and it's interrelated and your scenes aren't out of order, that kind of thing. If you get stuck, then step back and ask yourself questions. I've tried to ask questions after each part during the cave writing. So you start to understand questions. And I have a lot of unanswered questions here. That helps us to move forward. The questions I mentioned last time after I read part 7 of my story were, 1, where did the children or gnomes go? 2, will Missant tell the message to the larger group? 3, has Commander Thurnall betrayed them? Or someone else betrayed them? We don't know. 4, will Zolira find the water again? And will there be and will that be a way out? Or the way out for her? These questions, like I said, they help me continue if I feel stuck. Remember too, if you have someone stuck in the enemy's compound, you can check on them. And that is where I'm starting today. I'm going to go look in on Grant. And then I'm going to go back to Zolira. When I look in on Grant, I can give my reader a little more of an idea of why the antagonist is so bad. But if you're also looking in on a character in a dungeon or something, that doesn't mean the character will see everything or anything about the enemy. It's all your choice on what you do. If you decided later that you don't like something, you can edit it out. If you feel something is lacking, you can add it in. The important thing is to relax, have fun. There's no right or wrong here. There's no judgment. It's only creating. I'm creating worlds for Mind Adventures. What are you creating? Let's start. You're doing number 8. Let me read that again for you. Number 8 is start the struggle. What hurdles does the protagonist have to leap to get to even face the antagonist? Okay. Okay, writers, we are back. Let me read what I added to my cave story today. Grant groaned. He was in a lot of pain. I didn't know where he was. He tried to move and look around, but everything was dark, and there didn't seem to be much space around him. He closed his eyes as he thought about the last thing he remembered. As he thought, some images came into his mind. He and Tom were entering Maldrake's compound. Some of their teammates had gone before them, and they were mapping the place and finding the cameras. They talked on their radios that they had earpieces for, and no one else could hear what they said unless they happened to tap into the frequency. But their new technology allowed them to use frequencies at half steps. At the beginning, everything seemed fine. Every camera he saw, the other people on his team had warned about prior to him seeing it. And the map was displaying on his handheld device. Then, suddenly, Tom was running towards him and yelling and telling him they had to get out. The enemy had found them. He said that Chip and Jack were dead. Then Tom ran on, and lasers started firing down the hall. Grant remembered a laser hitting him, and he saw gates coming down from the ceiling on both sides of him. The gates cut him off from Tom, and from the tunnel Tom came from. Excuse me. Sorry. Tom turned back and asked what to do. Grant told him to run for all he was worth. Tom paused a few minutes, but then more lasers fired down the hallway. Grant knew the gates trapped him, so he lay down in the hall, partly because that way the lasers wouldn't hit him again, but also because the only thing he had left was astral jumping. Grant had tried to practice astral jumping each night, and he felt he could do astral projection, but jumping was something else entirely. There was no cord back to the body, because with astral jumping, you had to convert all the body's matter to energy, and all your clothes and keys from matter to energy. This was not the ideal situation to try this, but if he wasn't successful, he would be dead, or the enemy would mutilate him. Because he had practiced so often, he quickly dropped out of high beta waves to a lower alpha wave. After a few minutes, or several, he looked down at himself, and he saw he was all sparkling lights. He was pure energy. Now, the next problem was moving someplace other than where he was, and where the enemy couldn't find him. He saw enemies running towards him. They got to the gate and punched in the code. The gates rose up, and the enemies ran on down the hall, and both had run through him, which felt like a freight truck hit him. But he calmed himself. His energy wavered, and Grant felt it had to do with the lasers shooting him. So he wanted to get somewhere where the enemies couldn't find him, and he wanted to rest and look at his wounds. The thought of healing himself while in the state was too much of a foreign concept for him, so those thoughts didn't enter his mind. Then Grant didn't remember anything else. Grant tried to move, and it seemed that there was cave all around him, like he found a crevice and crawled in or dragged himself in. He tried to think if any part of Maldrake's fortress had some caves. He remembered that Maldrake had built the fortress against a mountain, and there were rumors of caves in the mountains because that was supposedly where he housed his prisoners that he experimented on. Grant closed his eyes and sighed. They never even got close to the caves. They were heading to the regular prisons to rescue people that they hoped were still human. They, of course, hoped to learn about the others, but that was too deep in Maldrake's lair. Grant moved his hands again, and he found the cave wall surrounded him. Wherever he was, it was a tight fit. So what he had to do was convert his body to energy again and move out. But to where? Grant didn't know how long he had slept. He was very hungry, so he felt he had missed a meal or two. But that also meant that the underground wouldn't be safe for him either. They would question him and scan him. And who knew if Tom had said captured or dead? If Tom said dead, they would never believe he was himself. First things first, he told himself. He had to get out. He tried to think where he wanted to go. He didn't want to go out the side of the Allies. And he didn't want to end up in the marshes. He briefly thought it might be good to see what all was in the cave, but he needed to get out and tend to any possible wounds. At least he had not bled to death. Grant closed his eyes and started breathing correctly to drop down in alpha waves again, and to see if he could convert his matter to energy. He was grateful that he felt clothes on him, so that meant he had converted everything, or at least most everything. He still hadn't taken an inventory of all his pockets. Zalira thought she had waited long enough, so she slowly walked to the security pad and typed in 912876. For several seconds, nothing happened. But then the shield went away. Solera squatted down and peered down the hall as far as she could see, and then she headed the way she thought was toward the water. Every sound spooked her, but she continued until she found where they had gathered the mushrooms. Solera dumped out her mushrooms. She didn't want to keep the poisonous things on her, and she felt she could find the water from here. Still, she was cautious and nervous. She didn't want the children to find her, and she halfway expected that they were leading the creature to her. When she found the chamber with water, she let out a sigh of relief. She wasn't worried about the creature in the water, because she thought the creature had helped her. But she did need to know which way to swim. She sat down on the floor and crossed her legs under herself. She started breathing and controlling her breathing. Solera didn't know if her message had made it to Missant or not, but what she wanted to do was a step above that. She wanted to send her essence out of her body and explore the water. Solera felt she was successful after a time, but she felt turned around, and she kept finding walls in front of herself, like there was no way out. She was disappointed. Suddenly, water splashed Solera, and she came out of her meditative state. She looked forward and saw a dolphin, and then she heard a noise behind her. She didn't have time to think. She got up and ran towards the water and dove down in the pool. The dolphin swam beside her close enough for her to grab its fin. Once she had a hold of the dolphin, it sped up its swimming. Solera felt it had entered a tunnel, and she didn't know how long she could hold her breath. Hopefully, she could make it to the end and be able to surface before she ran out of air. Okay, writers, that is all for today. We didn't learn a lot about Maldrake, our enemy, but Grant is still alive. He seems stuck, but we'll have to see if he can make it out of the fortress and where he ends up. Fortune seems to be with Solera because the dolphin is helping her. First, it splashed her to warn her of something. We don't quite know what she heard coming. Then the dolphin helped her swim through the tunnel. Of course, we didn't check in on the rest of the group or check on Commander Thurnal in the underground. But I did put in over 1,200 words today on our cave. So that it's like 2 scenes. A scene can be... I'm not going to say 500 words is a scene, because I had 2 scenes and 600 words. It depends. If you're just like a little scene like these, 500 words is about right. But if you have like a major battle or something, you can put a couple thousand, 2,000-3,000 down on a scene, or at least 1,000 to do a battle scene. You know, when you've built up to that climax and you got everything happening and everything coming together and the big battle, then you can do a couple thousand words easy for that scene. So just, you can leave a comment on how many words you kind of write with a scene. This is my totals, not necessarily standard totals. I hope you enjoyed adding to your cave today. Don't forget to send your writings to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. And of course, everything is copyright protected. So there's no worry for you. If you send in your writings for me to read on the channel, you're copyright protected. I look forward to reading about your caves. Leave a comment below on your total word count so far. Leave a comment below on if you have all the pieces together in one document, or if you have kept them separate. My total word count so far is 9,075 words. And it's all in one document. I write for y'all, and then I copy and paste it to the document where I want it to go, or where I think I want it to go. And 9,075 words is a good start to fantasy adventure. My genre of fantasy adventure is 80,000 words to 120,000 words. So, it depends on how detailed you get into the story, how many interrelated things. I've got several things going here. I had, you know, the underground, and then I had Zalira. Well, she was part of the underground, and then she broke away. And then Missant and Brambert, they took a group out. So you have now Missant's group, the underground, and you have Zalira, and now you have Grant. So we've got all these groups. So that makes more word count. If I just did Zalira and just concentrated on her, which you could do. You can concentrate on just one character and not check in on all the characters. Your word count will be less. So there's why you have the 80,000 to the 120,000. It gives you leeway to create what you want to create. Join me Friday for Eleni's Pride, Breaking Point, Chapter 10. More knowledge. Join me Tuesday for Talk About Jargon. Don't forget to visit my website, WritewithMykela.com, and read some character bios, and send your writings and chapters to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. And leave a comment on your favorite characters. If you hit the like, subscribe, and the bell notification, then we will continue to write together. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.